13, 16, 18. 18 rares, let's see. Uh, 19 rares, so I'm missing one rare. Let's see what that is late. Okay. First rare there is Onslaught. Onslaught is insane. It's basically allowing you to win on the spot if you have at least 3 creatures. Because your opponent usually has to block and loses troops in the process, or he cannot block and is just dead. So this card is insane in basically every wild deck there is. The threshold is prohibitive, so you're usually not splashing that one if you're not already wild, though the effect is strong enough to do that. So if you are mono, don't know, blood or ruby, and you're opening an onslaught in the second or third booster, you might consider splashing that, even though it's pretty hard to do. The effect is just insane, so you always want that card. You might even want to take the card if you do not intend to play that, because you lose against the card. You should know that the card is always good and not just in bunny decks, even though the card picture tells you that it's just a bunny card. Crash of Beasts. That's a pretty good card, even though escalation cards tend to be weaker in limited because you don't have the full playset around. This one allows you to create a 3/3 creature with Crush for 3, so that's on curve, or even above curve. It's above curve. And it shuffles itself into your deck and returns even stronger. I will always play that card in wild decks. And the first one is already a good, the first iteration of the card is always good, the second one is insane, and the third one you should be ashamed of yourself. Yeah, that's basically it. The giant caterpillar, I wasn't too impressed with it at first. Then I drafted it once and transformed it into the giant butterfly. I'm always reminded of the Pokemon because it's basically the same. Yeah, if you're attacking with the giant butterfly, your opponent doesn't have the removal, you win. Because he won't attack ever again. Well, that's most rare spoilers are handled by removal, but if your opponent doesn't have any removal, you win. So take this card. It's not easily splashable because you need 3 threshold, but still pretty good card. Uzume. I haven't played that one in a draft yet. I'm not very impressed with what I've seen so far in Constructed. The stats are just pretty bad for a 6-drop. I'm not saying that you shouldn't pick that card, but I don't think you should first pick it. And I don't see it going later than 4th or 5th pick. So it's alright, but usually too low impact for me. Pact of Life. Gain life when you play a resource. That's usually just bad. Don't pick this card in limited. The same goes for the Verdant Wildeboar. It's a pretty good constructed card. It's not as great in draft because you don't want to lose your creatures after one attack. It's all about creating an influence on the board, and this one doesn't. It's of course nice if it comes back as an 8/8 creature, but it's too unreliable to do so. I probably pick up the card anyway because it's good for constructed, if I were you and you don't have already enough of them. But you shouldn't be excited to play it in a draft deck. The same or similar reasoning is for Puck. Puck is an insane constructed card, but usually not as good as in constructed as in other way around. So it's not very good limited card because you usually are not that loaded with 5 drops or higher, or at least you shouldn't be, because you always want to have a curve. It's like many 2 and 3 drops, many 4 drops, fewer 5 drops, and maybe 1 or 2 6 drops. Of course, the ramp deck in Wild goes a bit higher, but you won't have much more than like 7 or 8 5+ drops in your deck, and that makes Puck pretty mediocre. He's still a 2/2 for 2 with a restrictive threshold cost, but well, don't be excited. Still can play him. Tectonic Break or Earthquake, whatever. It costs 7, so that's already a turn-off. Yeah, I don't want to play that card. It's randomly determine is always a turn-off. And it's a 7 drop, or a spell with cost of 7, so I don't say it isn't powerful enough but it's just not reliable, and you always want reliability in your draft. Consistency, I should say. Gigantify. Don't know the pronunciation of that one. It's a combat trick because it's a quick action, but it's also permanent. It's also pretty expensive. So it's pretty bad against removal because murder and inner conflict will kill your fatty or handle your fatty pretty fast. Don't pick that high, I think. Might be wrong. Is a good card definitely, but it's too much putting your eggs in one basket, and if the basket gets smashed, you lose. It's a gamble. I wouldn't play it. The Genesis Hydra is just insane. The stats are overcurve 4. That's easy to say. And the text is relevant because it gets bigger. I would play the card without any text, and the text is a strict upgrade, so enjoy, pick that card very highly if you're Wild. The Briar Patch Conjurer allows you to create Briar Legions, which is nice if you already have some Briar Legions. I wouldn't. I would rate the card dependent on the pack you open it. So in the first pack, it's probably a super good bomb, and you should always pick it because you can pick Briar Legions after that and go into Wild. In the second pack, if you're Wild, it's still a pretty good card because you still have 2 packs left with Briar Legions. In the third pack, if you don't already have at least 2 or 3 Briar Legions, you shouldn't pick the card. So, yeah. It gets worse over time. The Giant Beetle is... The stats are insane. 5/5 for 6 with the chance of flying. It's already very good. And then you can basically socket everything. It's a major socket, so you can use it as a removal. Pseudo removal, you can shrink an opposing troop to -5 attack, that's pretty strong. Get creatures back out of your graveyard with flight, that's pretty strong. Gaining life is again not that strong. This one is pretty good for your Shinhare deck, so if you're playing Shinhares and maybe even Diamond, think about taking the Prime Diamond of Solidarity to make your team insanely big. I've seen the Prime Diamond of Solidarity on the white 2-drop in a Shinhare deck. That was pretty nice. Should be strong in a draft as well. The red ones are not as good. I don't think that 5 damage to the face is weak, but it's not something you want to do usually in a draft. I don't know what I think about this gem. I haven't used it any time at all, so maybe it's good. I don't. It's a effect that allows you and your opponent to do the same. Forget the word. What's that? And that's usually not something you want. Only if you can exploit it very good, like in Extinction. If you're not playing any troops, Extinction is always one-sided and not double-sided. This one is always double-sided, I think. Flight is useless because it's already flying. Mill is usually not something you want to do in a wild Sapphire deck. Drawing cards with a flying creature is pretty strong. You should think about that. Spell Sheet is good even though it's just a minor gem. I'm not very excited about the pump, and well, this one is probably always the strongest. Creating just another creature, like you gain 8 power and toughness for 6 resources. That's insane. So this card should always be a first pick, I guess. The Plant Garden. The Plant Garden is much text. And it's already a turn-off because it's again randomly determined what creature it becomes. The Venus Fly Gorger is pretty good. The Spore Stalks is alright. Takes a bit. And the Vine Goliaths are alright, is insane. Okay, so all evolutions are good. The Flygorger and the Goliaths are obviously a bit better than the Stalks, I think. And it takes 3 turns, so if you are mono wild, you will want to pick that up. It might be a rare that comes around late. The Razroot Colossus, while very good in an Eye of Creation deck, is probably not limited playable. It's just too expensive. Might be wrong, but I think you need too much RAM to justify a 9-drop in your deck. The Right Root Dancer is a first pick. You should always pick that card if you're wild, or maybe even choose the chart because of this card, because it's just too powerful to gain a permanent bonus every time you play a resource. Even though the stats are nothing to be excited about, the text is. The Guest Troll is probably just a constructed card. If you are wild Ruby with a majority of Ruby cards in your deck, you should play the Guest Troll always, but you shouldn't first pick it and say, okay, I'm going a Ruby wild now. That's just not feasible, I guess. The Incantation of Savagery is probably playable, because a 6/3 with Spell Shield, I think, yes, is pretty good, and you will always play enough creatures to transform the Incantation. It's not insane. Yeah, you should probably play it if you're wild. I wouldn't be excited about it as much. The Spirit Dance, I was on the fence for a long time, then I played it, and well, it's insane. If you're playing it, it's always good. You don't want to delve into the shard just because you're opening a Spirit Dance. If you are wild, you want to play Spirit Dance, but you're not going to play wild just because of it. Though that might be wrong. It could be a real first pick. The problem is that if you are behind, the card won't do much. But you don't fall behind as easily as you do in other formats. So this one is pretty good. Okay, that was my rare pool. Let's see what I missed. Ritualist of the Spring Litter. If this card is existent, I don't know. It should be. It's a 1-drop. That's always alright. Yeah, it basically allows you to create more Shinhairs, which is good for the Shinhair deck and not playable in any other deck. So um, I probably wouldn't first pick it in a first pack because it's just too restrictive to just be a bunny deck that early without seeing any Bucktooth commanders around. But it's a good card, definitely. I think that should be it, right? Yes. Okay. Then the legendaries. Well, I won't have all legendaries, I think. I have 4 of them. Let's see how many there are. 4. Oh, okay, I got all the legendaries. That's nice. The Fist of Brigadon is basically forcing you to play mono white. There's no way that you're playing that in a 2-shard deck. Then again, it's super powerful, so you probably want to be mono white if you open the Fist of Brigadon. If you're picking it in the second or third pack, you should always think what you're losing. So if you already have a second shard, you might want to look at your removal cards you lose or your creatures you lose. Just keep that in mind. But the card is definitely very powerful. Jardim is much more splashable, even though he has a triple threshold requirement. And as a legendary, he is pretty insane again. He's not creating any card advantage for you, but he's giving you a lot of boost to end a game quickly. It's basically your opponent hopes to have removal for Jardim or that you don't draw any spell. Otherwise, he's dying pretty quickly, since flight and big flyer usually end the game fast. Eye of Creation is a good constructed card. It's not very impressive in draft IMO, in my opinion, sorry. You will play it in a ramp deck usually, but I wouldn't first pick it to play it in a draft. I would first pick it because it's expensive and I still need 3 for my constructed pool, but it's not a card I'm very excited to play in a draft deck. Pack Raptor, I don't know. This one is odd in draft. You create 4 Pack Raptors, which is good, of course, for your draft deck, because they are usually better than other creatures. And you should be able to draw them sooner because your deck is smaller. Then again, you don't have to focus your deck as much because either you play it in the first or second turn of your game and you will gain more Pack Raptors for your game plan, or you won't draw it and, well, your deck is still a fine wild deck. Whereas in Constructed, you usually need to focus your deck to be a Pack Raptor deck, so it's probably better in Limited than in Constructed. Might be wrong about that. I probably pick it up as soon as I see it. Swift Strike is just very, very powerful in draft. In Limited formats, because removal is just not as existent, and therefore creature combat or troop combat, is very important. And Swift Strike just dominates the board. Okay, that's the whole bang of wildcards. I will provide a list of ratings soon, and I hope my English is not as bad as I think it is. So see you next week with the next chart.